keeping up with cybersecurity news instantly makes you a better pen tester. Now, there's tons of exploits coming out in the wild constantly, and you can actually use this during your pen testing, during your engagements, on CTFs, on certifications, if you're going for something like OSCP. And there's just tons and tons of benefits to taking advantage of this for sure. Now, one other reason you really don't want to skip out on keeping up with cybersecurity news is it's going to cause you to fail one very common interview question that I've seen time and time again. It's one of the most common ones. And, it makes sense, right? That an employer would ask, like, how do you keep up with the news? Do you keep up with the cybersecurity news? And the reason is, if you put yourself in the shoes of these companies, right? They have to, their security teams are charged with the task, the very daunting task at that, of protecting the organization from security threats, ever-changing, ever-emerging security threats. So if they're going to hire someone on that's going to be tasked with trying to proactively find these threats so they can report back, so they can fix it, they're going to want that person that's hunting for it to be up to date with all the most, latest and greatest as far as cybersecurity. And beyond the theory and all that, let me just be straight up honest with you. Following this rule is the reason that I have the job that I do today. I would not have gotten hired on if I didn't keep up with cybersecurity news. And this is why. I was on an interview during the last round, and they assigned me a technical challenge. And this was a very difficult challenge. Essentially, I had 5 days to hack into 4 servers. And these boxes were actually very real world as well. So that's added to the challenge of everything. But essentially, I was nearing the last 24 hours of the allotted time, and I still did not have the amount of points that I needed to pass. And I was actually up against the box that was worth the most points, because up front they told me you need like X number of points in order to pass this challenge. So I knew the number. And going into that box, I spent a lot of time, once I got the initial access, I spent a lot of time trying to get the privilege escalation going, and I had an idea of how to do it, but I wasn't quite able to crack it. And then I remembered a recent vulnerability that had been, emerged in the security community they were talking about, and it happened to be a Windows vulnerability. I was dealing with a Windows machine, and so I got the idea. What if this wasn't patched yet? And this is what you should definitely be the mindset you should be taking on the actual engagements that you do for the company on the job and things like that as well. So nothing's off limits, basically, right? So I tested for this, long story short. I tested for it. I was like, this is vulnerable. This looks vulnerable. So when I ran it, I was actually able to get administrator, and that pushed me past the points requirement that I needed in order to pass the challenge. And that was literally, before that I had about 4 or 5 rounds of interviews with this same company. And this was the last step. So that ended up making all the difference, just keeping up with the cybersecurity news. So with that being said, how do you keep up with the news? Well, there's many ways to do it. Twitter is the #1 platform for this community, pretty much. That's where a lot of you'll find the most cutting edge information. You'll find up-to-minute updates, right? For example, when different strains of ransomware are out there, people will start posting on it when new, depending on who you follow, of course. You want to follow the big names, of course, like security researchers and stuff like that, or whatever area you're interested in, whatever area you focus on, right? If you're someone that's into bug bounties, follow guys like NahamSec and a lot of the bug bounty people, just depending on what you're into. I like to follow a lot of blue teamers as well, because then you can see from the other side what's happening, which is pretty valuable. And it's pretty funny sometimes to see what happens when, for example, when Bluekeep and some of these other big Windows vulnerabilities came out, a lot of these blue teamers, the threat hunters, they were setting up honeypots, and they're like, oh wow, there must be public exploits out there in the wild for this already. They hacked it within 5 minutes of me putting it up here, 30 minutes or whatever, right? So it's pretty interesting to hear about it from this perspective of the threat hunters out there as well. But another way, of course, to keep up with the news is things like YouTube, people making videos of stuff a lot of times right when they come out. For example, when Log4j came out, almost everyone had a YouTube video. I should have definitely have made one. I wasn't on it quick enough. But one thing I'd really love to know is You know, I'm sure a lot of you guys had this experience out there as well, especially the people that are more advanced on this channel. Let me know if you've ever discovered a vulnerability, like a new vulnerability that assisted you in some way. Maybe it was on like an engagement or a job interview challenge like I mentioned. I would love to hear your story down in the comments section below. However, if you're new here, I will say that keeping up with the news is not enough on its own. You also have to develop the technical skill set. So definitely check out the absolute beginner's roadmap to pen testing on the screen right now to get started doing exactly that. And I'll see you guys right over there.